Well, good morning and welcome to Elevenses. I'm Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training. I don't seem to have got my screen pointing in quite the right direction this morning. Camera's sort of offset slightly to one side. Right, anyway, okay. What have I got for you today? Well, a bunch of news stories, which I'm struggling actually at the moment to get up on screen for some reason. I know I wrote them, they're on the other PC, and I can see them on the other PC, I just can't see them on this one. All right, what do we have? Well, let me refocus on the other computer for a moment. We have a story about a that's the wrong one as well. All right, something's gone seriously awry with my news stories this morning, but let's see what I can do. We have a woman threatened with a knife as raiders ram raid a garage to steal a KTM motorcycle. We have a story about a budget GPS tracker from somebody called Mad Slick Motorcycles. Petrol, how much should it cost? Well, I'll give you the results of my impromptu survey whilst I was out in Essex on my mini ride out the other day. And we'll also have a look at MSV's switch to electricity with a solar racetrack that they're building in France. Suzuki have reached a deal with Dorna to quit the MotoGP series, and the latest update to the Tracer 900 is expected to offer radar cruise control. So today's discussion point, how is your old bike, new bike, is it going to be your old bike in new clothes? That's the thrust of today's discussion at the end of the show. So hopefully if I can get this actually onto the right screen, we can continue without too much of a hitch. Right, so just a couple of points of housekeeping before I carry on with the show. We had our ride out into Essex on yesterday, of course, and jolly nice it was too. Shame more people didn't make it. I was actually only joined by one person, which is just a little bit disappointing. But hey ho, these are the way things go. But I will be looking at other ride outs. Tell me if people want to come along, that's great. If they don't want to come along, well, I'll stop offering them. But yeah, let me know when I do put them up, and I will try to give you fair warning. I will try to run them in places that you can all get to as well. Kevin's looked in. Good morning, Kevin. I know Kevin expressed an interest in going out on one of these if I was able to run it in a place where he was local to. Right, so on with the show. As I say, I'm still trying to get the content up on the right screen where I can read it easily. Now, the first story actually today is a fairly shocking one. I've lost count of the number of times I've been covering bike theft, but this particular one, as I say, fairly scary, because what happened actually was that the woman involved, Ellie Smith, she was sitting on the doorstep of her home when she heard a loud bang which appeared to come from her garage. So that was around 10:45 p.m. on Friday the 15th of July. So a couple of weeks ago now, and not surprisingly, she rushed round to the garage to see what had happened, and she found that three masked men had actually rammed a car into it. Now, one of them then allegedly threatened her with a knife, another was sat in the car, the third was dragging the motorcycle out of the garage, and they all made off, taking the bike with them. Now, what was the motorcycle? It was a KTM 85, a 2022 model, and if I can actually get the picture up on screen, I will show it to you. That's the wrong thing. Hang on a minute. As I say, I've gone a bit belly up this morning due to a slight technical hitch with getting the script for the show up there. So there's the photo. Now KTM says the bike boasts real big bike components in a scaled down 85cc geometry, providing the ultimate kickstart to any young racing career. These aren't cheap, these bikes. They're £6,000 or thereabout, and it belonged to Ellie's 16-year-old cousin. It's not a road legal model, so it won't have been registered for road use, and I very much doubt it was insured, of course. So this was clearly a targeted theft. So presumably someone had seen the bike being ridden somewhere and then had followed the bike home, whether it was being ridden illegally on the road or whether it was perfectly legitimately used off-road and sort of carried in a van or even on a trailer. I have no idea, can't answer that one. But clearly the bike has gone missing and police are appealing for witnesses. Now, realistically, sorry to say, I suspect there's very little chance of seeing that bike again unless it was equipped with a tracker. But the thing is, how many of us actually fit trackers? I said for a long time that trackers are actually far too expensive. Now, the costs may be affordable to those who can afford to drop 15k plus on a new bike, but many riders are on budget machinery, and we know which bikes are most likely to get stolen. It is the small capacity 125s and scooters and that kind of machine. And there's just not the upfront cost of buying the unit, the tracker unit itself, and having it fitted. There's also often an annual subscription to the data center that monitors the tracker, and then of course there are the recurring costs to keep the unit active, and they can all add up fairly significantly. So I was quite interested to come across an outfit called Mad Slick Motorcycles, and they are now selling alarms and GPS trackers, and even an advanced GPS tracker which has an engine disable function which can be triggered remotely. And to give you an idea of what their prices are, their basic alarm is just £30 fitted, and the advanced tracker immobilizer is just £120. And if you take your bike up to them, they will fit it at that price. Now, there is a monthly charge, which includes the data service for the tracker and an access to the app and the online system, which tells you where your bike actually is. But it's a reasonable £5 a month. That's just £60 a year, and that's half of what many of the services are charging. Now, they also say it's not a contract, and they also point out that since it's not a direct debit, you can actually pause payment and then reactivate at a later date. I'm not sure why you would want to pause the payment, but maybe there are reasons. Maybe your bike is locked in Fort Knox for a few weeks while you're on holiday. I don't know. The app's available on iPhone and Android, of course, and you can also use a web browser to live track your bike. The report online about this particular tracker said that it's actually their own network which they've created, and it works in more than 100 countries. Something else that caught my eye is that it runs on the 4G system. Now, many of the cheaper trackers that you can buy off the internet actually use the oldest 2G network, and that's due to be turned off. And I've actually reported that story in a previous Elevenses. And if that's not enough, Mad Slick's Facebook page also says that if you've got your bike stolen and get it back, they will offer, quote, a free service to repair the wiring for you. And we mean free. Now, I'm always wary of things that look too good to be true. And I did notice that the website is a little bit basic, and their Facebook page was only created February last year, but they do seem to have been interviewed by the BBC. They've also talked to MCN. So there obviously there is a credibility for this outfit. Now, Mad Slick owner, who is Kieran Donnelly Shard, he says they'll also store stolen and recovered machines for free if you get it recovered by a recovery outfit, and they put it in storage. You will get hit with a swinging recovery charge, and they'll also fit a new ignition barrel at cost if your bike has been messed with and the ignition damaged, which seems to me an incredibly generous offer. According to a report in Motorcycle News, the owner Kieran Donnelly Shard, he says, if the barrel is damaged, I'll source a new one and charge for the cost of it, but I'll fit it for free. It's not a big job for me, but it can make a massive difference to a victim. So if you want to investigate Mad Slick Motorcycles further, they are out on in the Canvey Island area of Essex. Right, okay. So don't forget, you are watching Elevenses with Kevin Williams. If you want to catch this show, it's on Sundays and it's on Wednesdays. It goes out at 11 a.m. and you can always, of course, catch up here on Facebook after the event, or you can head over to my YouTube channel, Survival Skills UK, where you can find all of the shows neatly ordered, of course, in their own channel, as well as my other videos, which include my 60-second safety series. So do pop over there and have a look if you want to. Right, Richard has just said, I use the Vodafone Curve tracker. Cost is £12 and £2 a month. The only drawback, it needs charging. Is that based on a phone, Richard? Basically, if you've got a phone under the seat, I don't know. I'll have to have a look at that one. That seems remarkably budget priced, I have to admit. Right, so okay. Now, one thing that I did manage to do this week was get out for my mini ride out, and we headed out into the Essex area. We had a very nice ride. Yet another Kevin and myself, and good mix of some nice roads. Didn't see too many motorcycles because a lot of what I did was actually quite wiggly, quite minor roads. You would not find them unless you were actually looking for them, those kind of roads. And we got trailed by a motorcycle at one point. I thought perhaps he'd latched onto us because our ride looked more interesting than the road that we just turned off. But anyway, he followed us for quite a few miles, which was unusual. But one thing I did notice whilst we were enjoying the ride was the petrol, of course. Due to a slight oversight on my part, I had failed to fill the bike up as I normally do, ready to start a new day. So I did have to stop for petrol, and I managed to find it for about 183, which pence per litre, which isn't too bad after the heights of 190, nearly £2 a litre. But then on the way back, I actually passed a petrol station that was selling fuel at 162.9. So yes, petrol costs have dropped back slightly from the record highs we saw at the beginning of this month. The BBC reported that the average was 191.5, but I can tell you it was significantly more expensive than that in London and the southeast. But are retailers now exploiting the rapid rise to hold prices artificially high as the wholesale cost actually comes down? Now, there are quite a few people who do think that, even as the retail groups themselves claim that savings are being passed on. Fair Fuel UK, for instance, have accused retailers of blatant, unchecked profiteering. And they point out that the big culprits are actually the supermarkets because they drive local prices. If you think about it, most petrol stations will charge a couple of pence per litre more than the nearest big supermarket. So if the supermarket is expensive, the petrol station down the road will be too. Now, the RAC said a couple of days ago that retailers ought to be charging around 174p per litre for unleaded, where the average price was 188. Now, obviously, the price has come down a few p since then. That's my own observation. So presumably the actual retail price should have come down in line. Now, the same accusation of profiteering isn't just restricted to the UK. I found a story about exactly the same problem in New Zealand, incidentally. Now, my impromptu Essex price suggests that price is down 4 or 5p on the RAC's statement from just a couple of days ago. But if the price should be around 170p on the forecourt, how come that particular retailer was selling at 163? My guess is that possibly what they've done is cut their profit margin per litre to the absolute minimum. They're not going to make up the difference in shop sales, I'm sure. But what they are probably relying on is volume sales to make up the difference. And given that there was a huge queue to get into that particular petrol station, word had obviously gone round on the local network. And so perhaps that's their plan. But it really makes me wonder how much room there is for further reductions from your average supermarket or high street petrol station. I suspect they should be somewhat down on where they are at this moment. Right. Okay. Don't forget, if you do enjoy the show, do pop over to my coffee page, which is coffee.com survival skills, and you'll find any amount of useful riding material over there, articles on better biking, all sorts of things. The latest in the shop is 6 useful things to take on your motorcycle trip with you, one of which of course includes the side stand puck. Guess what I forgot to take with me yesterday? Yep, it was the side stand puck. I'd taken it out of the top box, or tail pack rather, to take a photograph of and put online. I never did that actually, but I forgot to put it back into the bike. So when we parked on a sort of loose gravel surface, I had to do the old-fashioned thing and find a big stone to prop the side stand on. Right, so do pop over to Coffee. Lots and lots of articles over there, more going up all the time, of course, and they are indexed. I do need to get a bit of indexing done on the last few, but yes, they are indexed over there, which makes them easier to find on a year-by-year basis. Right, now, what else? Over in northern France, Motorsports Vision, MSV, you probably know them as, have unveiled fresh proposals for its Couvron development in northeast France, with a view to establishing the site as the world's first self-sufficient eco-circuit. Now, the updated plans actually place a major emphasis on renewable energy, with the venue acting as a global leader, says the press release, in progressive green motor racing and automotive activities. Now, you'll probably also recall that MSV own most of the top circuits in the UK, and the organisation bought a 520-hectare site near the French town of Lyon in 2015. That's about 100 miles, if I remember correctly, from the coast, so not too far to drive from sort of the Channel ports. It's a former airfield, and they got permits for a race circuit and associated infrastructure back in February 2019. Now, of course, we all know what followed immediately after February 2019. The COVID pandemic actually offered MSV a period to review their project, and what they've done is shifted it towards hybrid technology and electric vehicles. And they say this allows them to establish Couvron as a green initiative. Now, the original plan was for a 5-mile, 8-kilometer circuit. Again, if I can get the picture of, I've got a photo of the circuit here somewhere. Here it is. So let's just blow that up a little bit. Why is that? The window's gone a funny shape. Right, there we go. That's better, isn't it? You can actually see what you're looking at now. Right, so as I say, the original design was to put a 8-kilometer, 5-mile track into that plot there. But what they've done is they've pared that back to what they describe as a challenging 3.5 kilometer, roughly 2-mile circuit, which is said to be more suited to EVs. I'm not entirely sure why, since they can reach pretty high speeds in race format, but hey ho. The plan is for 6 race events per year, plus manufacturer testing and development, promotional events and launches, and the inevitable money spinning corporate functions. But the key point is that the power for the EVs will come from a solar array, and approximately 300 hectares of the site will be allocated to electricity generation. And you can see the grey marked areas there where they plan to put the solar panels. Now, the construction time is set at about 4 years. Petrol and diesel engined cars and motorcycles will be able to use the circuit initially, at least. In the longer term, they hope for the reduced noise emissions to be part of their plan, and the new circuit is also twice as far from the nearest village as the previously announced big circuit. The other uses of the site are aimed at generating employment opportunities via industrial use of new and existing vehicles, and they will retain a small runway. You can see that actually in the middle of the picture there. The proposed runway is 1,200 meters long, 23 meters wide, and it's said it'll be available for electric plane operation, which is interesting, with electric charging points installed on site to recharge the plane from the electricity they themselves generate. All right, so comment from Kevin here. He says, you fuel all of my frustrations. Money grabbers, idiots, bad riders, daft limits, unfair enforcement. Yes, yes. Well, survival skills is therapy. Well, I hope so. I mean, I do try to highlight issues which grab my attention. I try to treat them fairly, objectively. I'm not here. I'm not getting fed money by anybody. Nobody's buying my time on air, so I don't have to put over a particular viewpoint. What I tell you is my own views, and yes, I am sometimes forthright. I know, and I hope that is what gets people coming back to these shows over and again. Right, now, moving on rapidly, a fairly short show today because I'm going out in a minute. It's the world of MotoGP we're moving to, and Suzuki's withdrawal from the Premier Series is now confirmed. Now, you'll recall that Suzuki had only recently signed an extension to their contract, undertaking to stay in MotoGP until 2016. But back in May, it was reported that the Japanese manufacturer was looking to quit the global race series at the end of this season. Now, the organisers of MotoGP, Dorna Sports, they warned Suzuki that they couldn't pull their team out unilaterally, but they would have to reach an accommodation, and that agreement has apparently now been reached. The implication is that there will be a monetary penalty. There is no news on how much Suzuki will be paying. It's probably a fairly sizable amount of money, after all. Dorna were expecting to have 2 Suzukis on the grid for the next 5 seasons. Now, it's actually the second time that Suzuki's departed the series. They initially withdrew when their contract ended in 2011, but returned, I think it was in 2015. Sadly, MotoGP is not the only race series to be poorer for the loss of Suzuki's involvement, because they have also pulled the plug on factory support for the French-based Suzuki Endurance Racing Team, CERT for short, in the Endurance World Championship. Their team will lose their funding at the end of the current year. A spokesperson for Suzuki, Toshihiro Suzuki, who's the representative director and president of Suzuki, actually said Suzuki has decided to end the participation of MotoGP and Endurance World Championship in the face of the need to reallocate resources on other initiatives for sustainability. This decision means that we'll take on the challenge to build the new motorcycle business operation by redirecting the technological capabilities and human resources we've cultivated through the motorcycle racing activities to investigate other routes for a sustainable future. Oh, I've still got the picture of the race circuit. I'm going to take that off. Kind of a lot of waffle words there, really, aren't there? Doesn't really tell you anything about what they are doing. But on a personal level, endurance racing has always been my favourite motorcycle racing event, and then it's particularly sad to see CERT go, because they really have set the standard that other teams have had to chase down for quite a few years now. Endurance racing was hugely popular at one time, with all the factories backing teams and huge crowds too at the showcase events, Le Mans, the Bol d'Or, and of course the Suzuka 8-hour race in Japan. But during the 2000s, lack of support meant that the series really did become something of a sideshow. It was really quite moribund about 10 years ago. The FIM have been attempting to rebuild that series in recent years, but my guess is that the Suzuki pullout will actually have a knock-on effect on other teams and their own support. So I think it's disappointing. I think it's perhaps not a nail in the coffin of the Endurance World Championship, but certainly it will be a bit of a hammer blow for them, I think. Right. Okay. Anything else I wanted to say to you? Before I just move on to the final story of the day, don't forget that I will be having a webinar on the science of being seen again. And I'm just trying to get the picture of that up on screen. There we are. We'll get there in the end if we persevere, as they say. Science of Being Seen, as you probably know by now, is an investigation into the way that we actually perceive the environment around us. It is entirely science-based, as the title suggests, and what it seeks to explain is the so-called SMIDSI, sorry mate, I didn't see you collision. And what I'm trying to debunk is this idea that drivers don't look for motorcycles. It's totally false. Very few instances can be put down to lack of attention from the driver. In the vast majority of cases, the driver does look, but there are reasons that we don't see things that are in the environment around us. And that's what Science of Being Seen attempts to explain. So the idea is not only to help drivers understand how they can miss a motorcycle which is in plain sight, but how to explain to motorcyclists how those drivers fail to see us and what we need to do about it to keep ourselves safe. Safety isn't a one-way thing. It's not something that we can rely on other people to deliver to us. We have to go out and grab safety for ourselves. And that's what the Science of Being Seen project is all about. It's all about understanding why drivers don't see us and having strategies to deal with it. So that particular talk is going out first Wednesday of August, which if I scroll back to my notes is Wednesday the 3rd. That's at 100 hours, 8 p.m. in the evening. Tickets are a miserable £5, and all funding that you pay for on these shows actually gets fed back into my time that I spend researching and writing all about Science of Being Seen. So you are supporting other people to learn about the project. So do pop over there and have a look if you possibly can at the next show, and please, if you can and you haven't seen it before, do come along and watch Science of Being Seen and tell your mates about it too. Spread the word down at your local bike club or bike group or friends and family. Anybody who rides a motorcycle really does need to understand Science of Being Seen. Right, so thank you very much for your help on that in advance. I'm just going to finish off with 3 different stories that caught my eye for 3 different reasons this week, but in a way they're all telling me the same thing. Now the first is coming back to the MotoGP thing. It's a report that Suzuki GP's director of motorcycles, Paul de Lusignan, has had to talk to a magazine to reject the increasing speculation that Suzuki is exiting the motorcycle market. So de Lusignan said, the ceasing of the racing is a commitment that we're investing more time and energy and resources into the development of future products. We'll continue to bring new models to market and you'll see new stuff from us. Now, where have I heard that before? Well, as it happens, of course, he's not the only Suzuki executive that's been wheeled out recently to prop up the Japanese manufacturer's reputation, because at the same time Suzuki were pulling the plug on their MotoGP team in May, they were pointing out then that there was no intention to cease production of motorcycles or power sports products in the US market. And the spokesperson there for the US, talking about the MotoGP exit, also promised new models coming soon. And he also said that the cash saved by quitting top-level racing will be plunged into the development of fresh new models. Now, de Lusignan, he actually said, I can't talk about future models that might come specifically, but what I can say is we're aware of the changes in the market. And he continued, the move away from sports bike to adventure bikes and then to the popularity of middleweight bikes. We've seen that happening and we'll be developing models that are going to appeal to customers in the future, markets that we're not currently in for sure. Well, it's not surprising he can say that, because frankly Suzuki aren't in a whole bunch of markets. Their model range is tiny. It's almost evaporated completely. The only evidence I've seen of new models from Suzuki, discounting the rehashed versions of their 1000cc bike, are 2 new 125 scooters. I'll be interested to see if there is any serious attempt to re-establish Suzuki as one of the big 4. Now, the second item that caught my eye was a scoop with photos of a new Tracer 900 being tested. Now, you're probably saying to yourself, didn't the Tracer get a full update in 2020, which included Euro 5 emission standards? Well, yes, it did. So what are Yamaha doing updating a 2-year-old bike? Well, the answer, it appears, is not very much. The spy shots show a different dash on the bike. It appears to be an increasingly standard LCD display. And there's also a black box apparently hanging under the front of the fairing, and that's speculated to allow the gubbins which controls cruise control to be fitted, and it would be radar operated is the speculation. So the idea is that it would bring it into line with some of the other sports or sort of adventure bikes which are appearing recently. But the third story in its way was even more bizarre, because it was all about this bike here. Now, the story said, Triumph Speed 4 review, full verdict after road and track testing. And it was dated Thursday last week. Now, the first thought that went through my mind was, is there a Triumph model that I have somehow missed? The second thought was that actually looks awfully like an old design, that huge can which actually projects beyond the end of the bike, for example. It looks very, very old-fashioned these days, doesn't it? And the wheels also look old-fashioned, those three-spoke wheels. So I had another look, of course, and I realised that in fact it is not a brand new four-cylinder motorcycle. It is in fact the old four-cylinder bike, the one which was sold with the bodywork stripped off the TT600 sports bike, and the bike that first appeared as a naked street fighter 20 years ago in 2002. Now, interestingly, the bike didn't even have a particularly long model run. It was actually discontinued by 2006. So why release a 20-year-old story with a fresh date on it? Well, the only thing that I can come up with is that the online rag actually has so few new bikes to actually write about, that they are not having sort of headline stories that pull in readers to whom they can display adverts. And of course, that means falling advertising revenue. So cynical me suggests that the redated story, which was then duly picked up, of course, by news feeds like mine, is going to intrigue people. They will click on it to see what this new bike is that's brand new out in 2022. And by the time they realise, like me, that they've not got their hands on a Scoop News Triumph in that story, the ads have been displayed, and the website has made its revenue from those adverts. So much the same probably applies to that story about the update on the Tracer. There's not really very much in it, but it gets people reading the story. And we're waiting, of course, for the government to go ahead with their consultation about the cut-off date for the final petrol engine bikes, 2035, if you recall. And it's an inevitable consequence as we all shift to a different future. We're going to see fewer and fewer new petrol engine bikes. Those that we do see, I suspect many of them will come from China, who are still busy getting a toe into the market. Mostly, I suspect, to establish their model ranges, so that they can exploit electric motorcycles in just over a decade's time. Or what we'll see are existing models repurposed with fresh bodywork, fresh riding positions, rather like that family of 750 twins that Honda are due to release, which all are based around the same platform. Or what you'll get is electronic upgrades to existing models, just like that Tracer 900, or the 1000cc Kawasaki, which I've talked about in the past, with its much reported Skyhook electronic suspension. Yes, it may be an upgrade to the suspension, but ultimately it's not a big upgrade. It's not a completely new motorcycle. So I fear that even if riders aren't happy with the idea, at least that's what MAG tell us with their survey of their membership. I think it's stories like this which show us that the petrol bike really has reached the end of the road. Well, that's it from me today. Don't forget, Science of Being Seen is the next of the live online events on Wednesday, the 3rd of August. I've just popped the link up for you. If you want to come along for that, do sign up for it. Remember, even if you can't make it live, which obviously means you can ask me questions at the end of the show, you can actually get the presentation on catch up for at least 72 hours after the event. So technical difficulties as well. If you happen to have technical difficulties on the day, don't panic. You are able to view that event for some time. And then September, next webcast is riding systems, what they are and why we need to apply them systematically. So I'll look at the difference between riding to a system and riding systematically. They are very, very different statements. That's Wednesday, the 7th of September at 8 p.m. Tickets for that again, £8. So you can book that on the same link. Right at the moment, I haven't got any more rides booked. I'm thinking about an evening ride out from Beaconsfield. So if anybody would like to join me on that, do drop me a line and I'll try and work around your available dates. All right, that is it. I said it was fairly short today. It still seems to have gone on for just over the 30 minutes. So thanks again for tuning in to Elevenses. I'm Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training, and I am inviting you to stay shiny side up if you're out there on your bike today.